radically new tactics that would challenge the Spartan phalanx.
First thing that Epaminondas did was he put his best troops on the left, and that had a number of ramifications. It meant that the battle would be a head-to-head among the elite contingents. Epaminondas would not be killing Peloponnesian allies, he would be killing Spartans. He would be telling his own allies, you're not going to have to face the Spartans, we're going to face the Spartans.
The Spartan army was not only defeated, it was destroyed. More than 70% of its troops that fought in the battle were dead.
Two main reasons why Sparta loses the key battle of Leuctra. One is its inflexibility, the fact that it's unwilling to or unable to respond to innovations, for example, deepening the line, new special forces, new equipment, and so on. But the other is simply numbers.
The Spartans don't have enough men anymore. They simply don't have the 9,000 men that they had been able to fight with in the Persian Wars. They don't have the 5,000 men that they fought with in the Peloponnesian Wars. They're down to a handful of full Spartans. The ones that are left fight well, there are just not enough of them.
Epaminondas simply bowled the Spartans over. They killed 700 of them, which they could ill afford to lose, and they discredited the entire idea of Spartan military invincibility. And then most importantly, Epaminondas did not see that as the end of things, but as the beginning.
After its defeat at Leuctra, a battered and demoralized Spartan army retreated to its homeland to regroup.
It's a devastating defeat for the Spartans, but it needn't have been a death blow, and it wouldn't have been a death blow if the Spartan system had the reserves, if it had the flexibility, the resources to respond to defeat. It's an indictment of the Spartans that this is precisely what they don't have.
Sparta's greatest asset, their social and political structure, was now their greatest liability. What had been once the source of their power and stability was now the source of their weakness and inertia. In 362 BC, the Spartans were defeated again by the Thebans at the Second Battle of Mantinea.
The Spartans were so wrapped up in their old-fashioned ways that they failed to learn from experience again and again, the most astonishing instance of which is their failure to win at Mantinea when they were confronted with exactly the same tactics that had defeated them at Leuctra.
You stick your neck out. If somebody hits you, you don't do it again. You do something else. You learn from it. But Sparta did not go for innovations. It was in its character to be conservative and to retain what was there.
Not only had Sparta lost its edge in traditional hoplite battle, it was incapable of the kind of flexibility needed to meet the challenge of new forms of battle.
Warfare has evolved into naval warfare, to siege warfare, and all of those require different skills than just valor or strength. They require knowledge, they require science. Once a city-state says we're going to poison your water, or we're going to fight you at night, or we're going to use slingers or archers or javelin throwers, then the Spartan system starts to collapse.
Warfare evolved, but Sparta did not. They continued the brutal practice of exposing unwanted infants and forcing young males to the trials of the agoge.
Perhaps they're being too rigorous in weeding out genetically inferior persons. By 370, we're down to as few as 1,000 adult males.
Ironically, the Spartan ideal of valor contributed to the decline. Developing a system where cowardice was a sin had left the best fighters not in Spartan regiments, but in Spartan graveyards.
Definition of cowardice would not necessarily be the one that we would use. It would not necessarily mean running away. Sometimes it meant surviving in a battle where everybody else was killed. The assumption was if you were any good, you would have been killed too.
The population decline was also the result of a Spartan birth rate that had been rapidly falling for at least a half-century.
Surely those nocturnal escape visits, visited by punishment if one were discovered, couldn't have been all that frequent, must have discouraged the opportunities for producing children, and must have contributed to the infamous decline of Spartan population over time.
If you want to have a vibrant population and you want to have women having children at 15, 16, 17, 18, which is necessary in the ancient world, given the prevalence of childhood diseases and the low survival rate of young kids, then it's a prescription for disaster.
Although there was a desperate shortfall of elite warriors, the Spartan system was conspiring to decrease their ranks even further.
Downward mobility was so easy, and upward mobility was virtually impossible. You could be demoted from the ranks for having failed to provide dinner for your messmates, for trembling in battle, from any number of other social sins, and there's really no way to come back up.
And so the Spartans developed a very dangerous sort of floating population of people who were Spartiates by birth, Spartiates by training, but had been deprived of Spartan citizenship. And so they were dishonored in a society in which honor was everything, and they would mean trouble.
That Sparta could allow this to happen, that it wasn't willing to make the ideological shift, and quite frankly, to commit the wealth to recruiting new members of the elite, is a terrible indictment of Sparta. And it bespeaks a state that was perhaps not fully in touch with reality.
And so now, for the first time in its long history, a weakened Sparta will be invaded and forced to defend itself on its own soil. Now, at its weakest point, Sparta had to face its biggest challenge. Epaminondas, the visionary Theban general, had a new vision: to redraw the map of the Peloponnese and cut off Spartan power at its source.
He was interested not just in destroying Spartan physical power, but destroying the myth of Spartan superiority, because that's really what was necessary to put the nail into the coffin. He understood that Sparta could not exist in anything like its traditional form if the Helots were freed.
They had depended completely on the agricultural labor of those Helots to keep the whole system going. Without Messenia, Sparta simply did not have the kind of resources to make it a first-class power.
With the backing of a Thebes, Athens, Corinth, Argos alliance, Epaminondas began phase one of his plan to destroy Sparta.
In early 369, he arrives in Messenia and announces that Messenians are no longer Helots, but will revert to their ancestral status as free and independent Greeks.
It's a very remarkable phenomenon, rather as if in the Old South one day you have black slaves and the next day they are citizens of their own state.
Epaminondas and his forces remained in Messenia nearly 4 months, while the liberated Helots, perhaps 250,000 strong, built a massive wall around the new city-state of Messene.
As these Messenians, of course, were the descendants of those many generations of Helots who had made Sparta what it was at the cost of their own independence and life, they were now in the happy position of presiding over the death of the great Spartan polis.
The one thing the Spartans had been trying for centuries to prevent, the return of Messenian independence, is precisely what happens.
And while the Helots built the walls of Messene, Epaminondas instituted phase 2 of his battle plan. Allied forces fortified a strategically key city to the north in Arcadia. It was called Megalopolis, literally in Greek, the Great City.
Here was another strong, powerful city, fortified in the hands of people who had every reason to fear a resurgence of Sparta.
They hem the Spartans in, and they ensure that never again can Sparta have the power that it once had. From that moment on, Sparta becomes a dinosaur.
Epaminondas was now poised for invasion. He had the Spartans cornered, and he had 70,000 troops at his disposal.